I've repositioned the floors again. This will be the final time because I'm about to weld. Everything's screwed up. I've got the frames in just temporarily because I put the reaction plate in just to make sure that all lines up, so all the bolts line up. They're all in, so that's good, so I know that's it's all in the right position. I'll probably leave the reaction plate in while I weld, but I'll take the frames out. The tech screws are in. I've been along and made sure there's no gaps under the plug welds there, but I'll continue to do that as I weld just to make sure nothing lifts. And just got to make sure they're flat against the welding surface. So they're all done. So I'm about to start on the right hand floor. I'll do some welding from the centre outwards. So I'll start on the bottom side, then I'll flip it over and then do some welds along here, progress along there, and then gradually tackle on the back and around the transmission tunnel. So that's all ready to go. I'll just put some enamel. It's one of the rust guard enamels on the inside of the cross member and the back plates there and the braces. I've also, I can stick the camera in there, put some black enamel in behind there, so I've painted that all up. Also inside the transmission tunnel, that's all epoxy enamel, so I won't be able to get at that once everything's welded up. So that's all ready to go. So now it's just a process of welding, which is going to take some time. Now I've just finished a marathon effort in welding the floors in. I've got both floors in. They're welded to the sills and to basically the bulkhead at the back, except for the cover plate. Haven't put that in. They're welded to the gearbox housing here, so that's all done. And of course they're welded together in the centre there. I've cleaned up the welds as best I can, so I'm just about to kill the bare metal with some phosphoric acid, so I'll do that next. Now I haven't welded the transmission tunnel in yet. The next bit that I'll tackle is the cross member, so I'll set that up and make sure that's right. I mean, I've already set it up before, but I'll set it up and remeasure again. I've put extra undercoat under that. I'll probably put some more undercoat inside the transmission tunnel where I've welded and it's burnt off, and I'll probably now even put some epoxy enamel on the floor part of the transmission tunnel. I was thinking about putting epoxy on here. Not sure yet. I mean, it's going to get burnt off. Well, certainly the flanges will get burnt off when I plug weld that onto the floor. I'm probably going to seam weld too. Not sure yet, but I'll start with the plug welds, and that will burn that off. But I've already put some. So there's some enamel inside that. So it's coated with black enamel, with the exception of the flanges. So I'll put the cross member in. weld that in place, and then I'll weld that transmission tunnel in place, and then move forward and put the sides on the gearbox area there too. So I'll weld those. Now I haven't welded the, tip this up. I haven't welded the brace or the stiffener, or whatever you like to call it, in there. I've got the original one, I just need to clean it up. Before I weld that on, of course, I'll make sure all that's sealed. It's not sealed at the moment, it's just had the welds cleaned up. Radius arm cups are on. I've used rivets. Now I got the rivets from Monocoque Metalworks, and they're actually welded in from the inside. They're clamped and welded, basically melted. The advice from Chuck at Monocoque was to crank the heat up on the MIG and basically melt that down, so it's melted and welded itself on. It's quite solid, so I'm happy with that. I've cleaned those up a little bit. Probably don't need to clean them up anymore. I've got to put the brace in here yet. I haven't done that. It's another thing to do. So there are a lot of things to do to get the floors in place. I didn't bother to count the plug welds. It would have been depressing. All I know is it took a lot of hours of welding. I mean, I didn't rush, but I didn't want anything to overheat. But it still takes a long time, and you're in and out trying to lean inside the car to weld these. So anyway, they're in. Plug welds have gone well. The penetration has been good, the weld penetration, so they're certainly not going to move. The amount of strength that this has put in the car is just remarkable. And it's not finished in terms of what needs to go in. When I've put the crossmember in, I'll put the brace that I've made for the end of the crossmember and for the jacking point, I'll weld that in. So that's not done yet either. So let's say welding is not finished. I've still got a lot of welding to go to get all the bits and pieces that I've actually fitted finally welded into place. And I'll just keep going. I'm about to start welding in the cross brace, this one here, and at the same time I'll be welding in the transmission tunnel. Now it's taken me 3.5 hours to actually set this up for welding. That time was spent making sure the position was right. I've triple checked that, so it's even both sides of the car, between here and the rear. Between here and the rear bulkhead, and also cleaning out the plug welds. Now I use a weld through primer, but even so I like to clean inside the plug weld because it actually dirties up the MIG gun, so I spent a lot of time cleaning that out. I had to put a few more Tech screws to make sure that the seams are flush with the floor, so I've done that all the way around. So 120 odd plug welds. There are a number of seam welds as well, particularly around the ends of the crossmember onto the inner sill, and some seam welds down on the transmission tunnel. I've got those. I've made sure that just turn the car over. I've made sure that the transmission bolt holes line up, and so I've actually put bolts in those, so I know that they'll be able to go in. I've also repositioned the rear gearbox mount just to make sure everything was in alignment. Check that again, that's been done. I'm putting some plug wells underneath in the centre part of the cross member to make sure it's completely attached to the floor. So both on the outside here where the captive nuts are, and also on the inside, which is actually inside the transmission tunnel. So I've got a few of those in there as well. So it's all ready to go. So 3.5 hours to get to this stage, and a lot more hours welding. I think I said when I did the floor, I don't rush the process. I don't want to overheat anything, and that just takes a bit more time. The result of welding in the floors was that this cross member, I had trial fitted that before welding the floors in, and having welded the floors in, it dropped in without any problem. So it just sort of reinforces the need to make sure you don't rust things and end up distorting panels. So everything's gone in. As I say, it just took a bit longer to clean everything up and to make sure everything is completely flush for welding. Anyway, I'll turn this off and start. Finished welding the cross brace in. It took a long time. Very fiddly job, sort of climbing in and out of the cab. Had to tilt the rotisserie a bit to be able to access some of the welds. All finished along the transmission tunnel. I've put the welds at the end here, around the end of the cross member on both sides, so that's all nice and tight. Everything's getting nice and tight and strong. Probably the strongest it's been in many years. The next thing I've decided to do, I was going to put the end braces that I made up for the inside of the sill there, but I've decided I'll keep going and put the side of the gearbox in next, just so all this is finished and nice and solid in the centre of the car. So that's the next thing. Once again, this was pre-fitted, but I'll now attach it back on, put tech screws. I might have to put a few more tech screws to make sure the flanges are flat. I'll put the cover back on just to make sure that it is in the right position before I make the final weld, but it should be right. But anyway, I always like to check. So that's the next thing. I'll just start putting that cover back on. Now the welding continues. The latest addition is just turn the light onto that, is the side of the gearbox here. It's all been welded in, completely welded, seam welded across the top here, and it's a lot of welding in to get this in. Welding it around the cross member, having to put the gearbox mounting captive nut on, which isn't on the part when it comes, so you've got to put that on. I positioned that using the actual mounting plate, bolting it up underneath. Also welding the floor to the bulkhead, done all of that. Inside the welding seams inside as well, all that's done. All in all, it takes a lot longer than you think, let's say the amount of welding you've got to do, and then of course cleaning it up. So anyway, that's done. I still haven't welded the brace underneath. I've decided I'll put that on last. The next bit will be to weld these in. It's going to be a little bit more difficult. I don't like welding, doing plug welds in a vertical position, and that's really what I've got to do because of the way that's positioned in there. So it's just going to be a little bit awkward, but that's the next thing. I'll put the weld the braces in. So not only plug welding to the rear bulkhead here, but also putting a bit of a seam weld across the bottom there. I'm pretty sure that has to be welded. I mean, I've seen some photos where it's been welded, so, and it would make sense just to weld that on. It would really tighten the floor up, and certainly the radius arm cup underneath make that quite a solid piece. Then I'll put the cover plates on. So that's the next thing to do. Don't know how long that'll take. It looks easy enough to do, but I'm sure it'll take more time than you initially think. So anyway, I'm about to do that. So the welding process still hasn't finished. With all of the bits and pieces that I've spent so much time fitting, you know, I thought that was a long time just to fit the panels, but it's just taking almost as much time to weld them in. So anyway, I'll continue with that. It's taken me 4 hours to set this up for welding, just making sure that all the plug weld points are in contact with the surface underneath. I'll just get myself in the car. Also making sure that get that out, that the dowel points are free, so they're all lined up. Better to do that now than when it's welded. So that's all done. Put extra Tech screws in just to make sure it's seated everywhere. So it should be right. Now, having put all that on, I've got to take all that off again so I can weld these braces in at the back. I wanted to make sure that they're in exactly the right position before I did that, so just to recheck that, so that's fine. So I'll take this cover, this plate off, and start welding those in, and then I'll weld the covers in. So that'll take hours too. There's a lot of plug welds to do, and also some some seam welds along the bottom of the brace onto the plate here. So it's quite a lot of welding, but when it's done, it'll be extremely tight. The main braces have now been welded in, both sides, and I've put another coat of black enamel, epoxy enamel on the inside. Maybe not necessary, I think I've said before, but I know it was rusted when I got the car. It was rusted on the bottom end and obviously around the floor, so just a bit more protection before I seal it up. Eventually I'll put some form of cavity spray in there, but this will certainly hold it. two closing panels have been fitted and welded up. I've also brazed the tops just at the ends. Now that's the way they were when I pulled it apart, so I decided to replicate that. So having done that, now they're complete. Down the bottom here, I haven't welded the closing panel to the bottom. I don't think that's necessary, but I'll probably need to put a bit of sealer around the edge where there's a gap that goes in behind the panel. So I need to seal that, but I won't do that just yet. So they're complete, everything's locked up there now. So all of the floor area is now complete, inner sills and floor. Just a few more things to do. I haven't put the brace on underneath, and I haven't put the braces at the end of the crossmember that I've made up. I'm just going to look at those now. The only thing I need to be wary of is that when I put those braces in, it doesn't foul the outer sill. So I'll have to play around with the outer sill just to make sure there's no interference there. The other braces have now been put in. I've made sure that they cover the width of the cross brace inside, as well as supporting the jacking point. It's actually tightened everything up rock solid, so I've done them on both sides, of course. Same thing on the other side. Let's get around there. Just in there. So that one's the same position, so it's nice and solid. I've just been working on the tie plate in here. I've just put some red oxide underneath it. I've got the tie plate just on the other side. Might be able to tip that over without dropping it. There's the tie plate. It's got red oxide underneath. When that dries off tomorrow, I'll put some epoxy enamel, so both underneath that and on the floor section that it covers, so it's all sealed up. So that's ready to weld in, and then I'll probably just tripping over things here. Just put the front panels in. I've got to put the engine frame mounting bolts in there. I've got to weld that in. So I'll put the frame in place to make sure it's exactly in the right position. And I'll put the bulkhead plates in. I might just do them with Tech screws at this stage. So I'll fit them. I mean, they've already been basically fitted, but I'll fit them with Tech screws before I start taking this front panel off. So I'll probably, as I say, weld the engine frame mounts in, put the bulkhead covers in, and then I've actually got to remount the car. I'll take these mounting sections off because I've got to be able to get to that front panel. I'll mount it from the reaction plate. I mean, I've already got a bolt through on this back bolt, but I'll put one on the outside and run the reaction bolt through. so it'll give it something solid. Plus I will put the gearbox template that I've got, which mounts to the rails, so I'll bolt that in, so basically it'll be held by the centre of the floor. Now that's all nice and tight now because everything's welded in, so it's quite solid, and when I put the tie plate in, it'll strengthen everything even more. So it'll have be basically mounted by the gearbox mounting section and by the reaction plate bolt hole in there. So that should be enough to make sure the car doesn't move while I work on this top section here.